Most people spend their entire lives searching for self-love, and they never realize it's not missing, it's been buried under years of self-criticism, broken promises, and a voice in your head that keeps telling you you're not enough. Let me ask you something. If loving yourself were automatic, wouldn't you have done it by now? So what's really stopping you? Tonight, you're not here to feel inspired for 5 minutes. You're here to uncover the one truth that changes how you see yourself forever. Because once you get this, self-love stops being a struggle and becomes a decision. Most people think self-love is something you feel. They're waiting for a moment when confidence magically appears, when the pain fades, when life finally makes sense, and then they'll love themselves. But that moment almost never comes because self-love doesn't begin as a feeling, it begins as a decision. And until you understand that, you'll keep chasing it instead of creating it. Here's the truth most people never learn. Feelings follow actions, not the other way around. You don't wake up one day feeling strong and then start acting strong. You act strong long enough that your nervous system begins to believe you are strong. The same is true with self-love. You don't wait to feel worthy. You decide to treat yourself as if you already are. Think about it. How many times have you said, I'll be kinder to myself when I'm more successful, when I lose the weight, when I fix my life, when I stop messing up? That's not self-love. That's self-rejection with conditions, and conditions will keep you trapped forever. Loving yourself means choosing respect even when you're disappointed in yourself. It means choosing compassion when you fail. It means choosing to speak to yourself like someone you care about, not someone you're trying to punish into change. Because punishment doesn't create transformation. Identity does. Right now, whether you realize it or not, you are in a relationship with yourself. And like any relationship, it's built on patterns. How you talk to yourself when no one is listening. How you treat your body when no one is watching. How you respond to your own mistakes. Those patterns don't change because you suddenly feel better. They change because you decide, this is no longer how I treat myself. Self-love is not about liking everything about yourself. It's about honoring yourself enough to stop abandoning yourself. It's about staying with yourself when things get uncomfortable instead of turning against yourself. Most people walk away from themselves the moment things get hard. They criticize, they shame, they replay their failures over and over again, and then they wonder why they feel empty. Let me be clear with you. If you talk to your best friend the way you talk to yourself, you wouldn't have that friend anymore. And yet you expect yourself to grow in an environment of constant emotional attack. That doesn't make you strong. It makes you exhausted. Self-love starts the moment you decide, no matter what happens, I'm on my own side. Not because you're perfect, not because you've earned it, but because choosing yourself is the foundation for every other change you want to make. You see, people think loving yourself will make you complacent. They think if they stop being hard on themselves, they'll lose their edge. That's a lie. The truth is, when you respect yourself, your standards rise. When you care about yourself, you stop settling. When you love yourself, you don't lower your expectations. You raise them because now you believe you're worth the effort. This decision shows up in small moments when you're tired and you still keep a promise you made to yourself. When you fail and you choose to learn instead of attack. When you feel unworthy and you take action anyway. That's self-love in motion. And here's what most people miss. Self-love isn't soft. It's not passive. It's not indulgent. Real self-love is disciplined. It says, I will do what's good for me, even when it's uncomfortable. It's the parent inside you, not the critic. The one who says, I care too much about you to let you keep destroying yourself. Every time you choose to respect yourself, even in a small way, you send a message to your brain, I matter. And the brain responds to proof, not words. Over time, those decisions stack. Confidence grows, self-trust deepens, and one day you realize you're no longer chasing self-love, you're living from it. So stop waiting to feel different. Stop waiting for permission. Stop waiting for proof that you're worthy. Make the decision now, today, to treat yourself like someone worth caring for, because the moment you decide, everything else can begin to change. Most people believe their biggest problem is a lack of confidence, discipline, or motivation. But that's not the real battle. The real battle is happening quietly, relentlessly inside your own mind. It's the voice you hear when you wake up in the morning. It's the commentary running in the background while you work, while you fail, while you try again. And whether you realize it or not, that voice is shaping who you believe you are. You can't build a loving relationship with yourself while being verbally abusive to yourself. And that's exactly what most people are doing all day long. They wouldn't allow anyone else to speak to them the way they speak to themselves, yet they accept it as truth because it's familiar. But familiar doesn't mean accurate. It just means repeated. That voice didn't start with you. It was trained into you. by past failures, criticism, rejection, comparison, and moments when you felt unseen or not enough. Over time, those moments formed a pattern, and that pattern became a story. And now that story feels like your identity. Here's the dangerous part. The mind believes what it hears most often, not what's logical, not what's true, what's repeated. If you keep telling yourself you're behind, broken, or incapable, your nervous system responds as if that's reality. Your body tightens, your energy drops, your actions shrink, and then your results confirm the story you've been telling yourself all along. This is why people stay stuck even when they know what to do. Knowledge isn't the issue. The issue is that the voice in their head is arguing against their own success. Every time they try to change, that voice says, "Who do you think you are?" Every time they fail, it says, "See, I told you." And slowly that voice becomes the authority in their life. But here's the shift that changes everything. You are not the voice in your head. You are the one who hears it. That voice is a habit, not a fact. And habits can be changed. The moment you begin to observe that voice instead of obeying it, you create space. And in that space, you regain choice. You start to notice patterns like, I always attack myself when I make a mistake, or I minimize myself before anyone else can, or I replay the past every time I feel uncomfortable. Awareness is the first interruption of any pattern. Now, let me be clear. Changing the voice doesn't mean pretending everything is positive. It means telling the truth with power instead of judgment. There's a massive difference between saying, I failed because I'm a failure, and saying, that didn't work and I'm learning. One destroys identity, the other builds it. Your self-talk should challenge you without crushing you. It should push you forward without tearing you down. Because the goal isn't to eliminate that voice, it's to retrain it. Just like a coach does with an athlete. The best coaches don't insult their players into greatness. They correct, guide, and reinforce belief. Every word you say to yourself carries emotional weight, and emotion fuels behavior. If your inner voice is heavy, your actions will be heavy. If your inner voice is empowering, your actions become energized. This is why two people can face the same situation and get completely different results. Their internal dialogue creates a different emotional state. And here's the key. You don't change your life by changing your circumstances. You change your life by changing the meaning you give to those circumstances. The voice in your head is the meaning maker. When it says, this is happening because I'm not enough, you collapse. When it says, this is happening to train me, you rise. Start catching the moments when that voice is on autopilot, when it exaggerates, when it generalizes, when it speaks in absolutes like always and never. Those are lies dressed up as certainty. Interrupt them, replace them with language that creates strength instead of shame. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being conscious. Every time you choose a better story, you reclaim a piece of yourself. Over time, that new voice becomes familiar, and familiarity turns into belief. You don't need more motivation. You need a new relationship with your mind, because the moment you change the voice in your head, you change the direction of your life. Most people believe they struggle with self-love because something is wrong with them. But that's not the truth. The real reason they feel stuck is because they're loyal to an identity that was formed in pain, an identity that once protected them, helped them survive, helped them make sense of the world. And now, even though it no longer serves them, they keep defending it without realizing it. You don't cling to an old version of yourself because you enjoy suffering. You cling to it because it's familiar, because it explains your past, because it gives meaning to the hurt you went through, and letting it go feels like betraying your own story. But here's what you must understand. Survival identities are meant to get you through a chapter, not define your entire life. At some point, you learned who you were supposed to be. Maybe you learned you had to be strong and never ask for help. Maybe you learned you had to stay small to be accepted. Maybe you learned you had to prove your worth through achievement, or that you were too much or not enough. Those lessons didn't come from nowhere. They came from real experiences. And for a time, they made sense. But the identity that once protected you can become the prison that keeps you from growing. Here's how you know you're loyal to an old identity. Every time you try to change, there's resistance. Not from the world, from within. A voice that says, this isn't who you are. A feeling that says, if I succeed, I'll lose myself. Or even fear that says, if I let go of this pain, my past won't matter anymore. That fear is powerful because pain becomes part of how people define themselves. They wear it like proof of endurance, like evidence that their struggles meant something, and unconsciously, they believe that if they heal, they erase their story. But healing doesn't erase your past. It redeems it. You are not dishonoring what you went through by becoming more than it. You're honoring it by refusing to let it limit you. Most people don't realize this, but they defend their limitations. They explain why they can't change. They repeat the same stories about why things are hard for them. And every time they do, they reinforce the identity that keeps them stuck. Not because they want to fail, but because that identity feels safe. Change threatens identity, and the mind will always choose a familiar pain over an unfamiliar possibility unless you consciously intervene. This is why self-love feels impossible for so many people, because loving themselves would require letting go of the versio and of themselves that learn to survive through self-criticism, control, or withdrawal. And that version feels like home, even if it hurts. But here's the turning point. You are allowed to evolve without explanation. You don't owe loyalty to an identity that no longer fits. You don't have to keep proving you were hurt. You don't have to keep reliving old wounds to justify your existence. Your past explains you. It does not define you. There is a future version of you that operates with more peace, more confidence, more self-respect. And the only thing separating you from that version is the willingness to release who you no longer need to be. That doesn't mean rejecting your past. It means integrating it, learning from it, and then stepping forward with a new standard. Identity is powerful because behavior always follows who you believe you are. If you believe you're broken, you'll act broken. If you believe you're growing, you'll act in alignment with growth. This is why real change isn't about willpower. It's about identity shift. And identity shifts don't happen overnight. They happen through decisions. Small, consistent decisions that say, I am no longer that person. Every time you choose differently, you weaken the old identity and strengthen the new one. Over time, what once felt unfamiliar becomes natural. You don't lose yourself when you let go of an old identity. You find yourself. So stop asking why you're the way you are. Start asking who you're choosing to be. Become. Because the moment you release loyalty to who you were, you create space for who you're meant to be. Most people spend their lives asking the same exhausting question, am I enough? And no matter how much they achieve, how many people approve of them, or how hard they try, that question never gives them peace because it's the wrong question. It keeps you trapped in comparison, judgment, and self-doubt. And as long as you're asking, you'll always be measuring yourself against a moving target that can never be satisfied. Here's the truth. The question, am I enough, has no finish line. There will always be someone smarter, further ahead, more confident, more accomplished. If your self-worth depends on being enough in comparison to others, you'll live your life on trial, always defending, always proving, always waiting for a verdict that never comes. The shift that changes everything is simple, but it's not easy. You stop asking, am I enough? And you start asking, how can I grow? That single change takes you out of judgment and puts you into momentum. It moves you from self-criticism into self-respect because growth assumes worth. You don't invest in something you believe is worthless. When you focus on growth, you no longer need to be perfect. You just need to be engaged. You don't need to win every day. You need to learn every day. And that mindset is incredibly freeing. It gives you permission to fail without collapsing your identity. Failure becomes feedback. Instead of proof that something is wrong with you, most people don't fear failure. They fear what failure will say about them. They fear it will confirm their worst beliefs. But when your identity is rooted in growth, failure can't define you. It can only inform you. Think about it. Every area of your life where you feel confident today is an area where you once didn't know what you were doing. You didn't wait until you were enough to start. You started, you stumbled, you learned, and over time, competence was built. Self-love works the same way. It grows through participation, not evaluation. The moment you commit to growth, something powerful happens inside you. Your standards rise not because you're trying to prove yourself, but because you care about your potential. You begin to ask better questions. Instead of what's wrong with me, you ask, what's this trying to teach me? Instead of why can't I do this, you ask, what's the next step? And that shift creates energy because judgment drains energy. Growth creates it. Here's what most people miss. Self-love and growth are not opposites. They are partners. Loving yourself doesn't mean staying the same. It means believing you're worth the effort it takes to improve. It means you stop settling for habits, relationships, and patterns that keep you small, not because you hate yourself, but because you respect yourself too much to stay there. When you're stuck in the enough question, you either quit or overcome. Pensate. You play small to avoid failure, or you push yourself mercilessly trying to earn worth. Neither leads to peace. Growth, on the other hand, is balance. It's firm but compassionate. It says, I accept where I am and I'm committed to where I'm going. And that commitment changes how you show up. You stop avoiding challenges. You stop needing constant validation. You stop being paralyzed by other people's opinions because now your focus is internal and forward. You measure success by progress, not perfection. This also changes how you handle setbacks. Instead of spiraling into self-blame, you pause, you reflect, you adjust. That's emotional maturity. That's self-leadership, and that's real confidence. Understand this. Growth is not about fixing yourself. It's about expressing yourself more fully. You're not broken. You're unfinished, and unfinished things are meant to evolve. The most confident people you know aren't the ones who never doubt themselves. They're the ones who don't let doubt stop them. They trust that they can learn, adapt, and rise. That trust comes from a growth identity. So let go of the courtroom in your mind. Stop putting yourself on trial every day. You don't need to prove your worth. You need to invest in your growth, because the moment you shift from asking if you're enough to committing to becoming more, you stop chasing self-love and start living it. Most people think self-love is something you feel inside, but the truth is it shows up more clearly in what you tolerate. What you allow into your life emotionally, mentally, and physically is the clearest reflection of how much you value yourself. Not what you say, not what you post, what you tolerate. If you accept disrespect, chaos, broken promises, or constant emotional drain, it's not because you don't know better. It's because at some level, your standards have been set there. And standards are never accidental. They are the result of what you believe you deserve. Here's what most people don't want to admit. You always get outcomes that match your standards, not your desires, not your intentions, your standards. You can want a better life, healthier relationships, more confidence. But if your standards are low, your life will always pull you back to what feels familiar. Self-love begins when you decide this is no longer acceptable for me. And that decision doesn't come from anger or ego. It comes from self-respect. Raising your standards is not about becoming demanding or superior. It's about becoming aligned with your values, aligned with your future, aligned with who you are becoming. When your standards rise, your behavior changes naturally. You don't have to force discipline. You become disciplined because your identity shifts. Look at your life right now, the conversations you stay in, the habits you keep repeating, the way you let people speak to you, the promises you break to yourself. Every one of these is a vote for the level O. F self-love you're currently living at. And here's the hard truth. People don't rise to your expectations. They fall to your standards, including you. If you constantly lower your standards to avoid discomfort, rejection, or conflict, you teach yourself that peace is more important than self-respect. And over time, that erodes your confidence, because confidence comes from congruence, doing what you know is right for you, even when it's uncomfortable. Most people avoid raising their standards because they're afraid of what they might lose. They fear being alone. They fear disappointing others. They fear having to change. But what they don't see is what they're already losing: energy, time, self-trust, and belief in themselves. Every time you tolerate what doesn't align with you, you pay a price. Maybe not immediately, but eventually. And that price is always paid internally. Self-love says, I am willing to feel temporary discomfort for long-term self-respect. It says, I won't betray myself just to be accepted. And that choice is powerful, because the moment you stop negotiating with your values, your life starts to stabilize. Raising your standards doesn't mean you judge others. It means you choose yourself. It means you become clear about what you will and will not accept from others and from yourself. Because the most important standard you'll ever set is how you treat you. This is where real change happens. When you stop making excuses for behaviors that keep you small. When you stop normalizing burnout, disrespect, and self-neglect. When you decide that your time, energy, and attention are valuable. At first, raising your standards feels uncomfortable. It feels unfamiliar. You might even feel guilty, but guilt is often just a sign that you're breaking an old pattern. And on the other side of that discomfort is freedom. People will adjust. Some will rise to meet you. Some will fall away. And that's not a loss. That's alignment. Because when you respect yourself, you naturally attract situations and relationships that reflect that respect. Your standards are a declaration. They say, this is who I am now, and the world responds accordingly. So if you want to know how much you love yourself, don't look at your intentions, look at your standards, because the moment you raise them, everything else begins to rise with them. At the core of self-love, beneath all the ideas and emotions, there is one simple truth most people overlook. You cannot love yourself if you do not trust self. And trust is not built through words, affirmations, or intentions. It is built through action. specifically through keeping promises to yourself. Every time you say you're going to do something and you don't do it, something subtle but powerful happens inside you. You may brush it off, but your mind doesn't. Your nervous system records it. It learns, my word doesn't mean much. Over time, that erodes confidence. Not because you failed, but because you stopped believing yourself. Most people think confidence comes from success or praise. It doesn't. It comes from self-integrity, from knowing that when you commit to something, you follow through, even when it's hard, especially when no one is watching. This is why so many people struggle with self-love. They keep breaking small promises to themselves every day. They say they'll take care of their body, and they don't. They say they'll set boundaries, and they don't. They say they'll start tomorrow, and tomorrow never comes. And with every broken promise, they quietly lose a little more self-respect. But here's the empowering truth. The same process that breaks self-trust can rebuild it, one kept promise at a time. You don't need to overhaul your life. You need to start honoring your word to yourself. Small promises, manageable promises, promises you can keep even on your worst days, because self-love is not built in grand moments. It's built in quiet consistency. When you keep a promise to yourself, even a simple one, you send a powerful signal, I matter, and your brain responds to evidence, not motivation. Over time, that evidence compounds. You begin to feel stronger, not because life got easier, but because you became reliable to yourself. This changes how you see yourself. You stop needing external validation. You stop doubting your ability to follow through. You begin to trust your decisions because they're backed by action. And that trust becomes the foundation of confidence. Most people wait to feel confident before they act. But confidence is the reward, not the requirement. Action comes first. Trust comes second. Confidence follows. Now, here's where this ties into everything we've talked about. When you keep promises to yourself, your inner voice changes. It becomes more supportive because it has proof. Your identity begins to shift because your behavior is different. Your standards rise because you no longer tolerate self-betrayal. Growth becomes natural because you trust yourself to handle challenges. And here's the key. Keeping promises to yourself is an act of self-love, even when you don't feel loving toward yourself. Especially then, it's you showing up for you. It's you saying, I will not abandon myself. This doesn't mean you never fail. It means you choose to repair instead of quit. If you miss a day, you don't spiral, you reset, you recommit, because self-love isn't about perfection, it's about persistence. Imagine how your life would change if you trusted yourself. If you knew deep down that when you set a goal, you'd take the steps. If you knew that when things got hard, you wouldn't disappear on yourself. That trust is priceless, and it's available to you starting now. So start small. Make one promise today and keep it. Let that be the beginning of a new relationship with yourself. Because when you become someone you can rely on, loving yourself is no longer a struggle. It's a natural result.